let me explain to you how communication works. It's a very basic concept, and apparently some people don't get this. It goes like this. You have to assume what a speaker is thinking in order to understand what they're saying. So you have to consider the source. So if your best friend mocks you, you say, it's my best friend. In my best friend's mind, they're not being mean to me, they're just having fun. So who says it and what they're thinking completely determines how you accept it, right? One of the questions that I was asked here is to teach people how to know who to trust in the news, which is a good question, right? How do you know who to trust? All the pundits, all the experts, all the news people, what rules do you use? And there are lots of them, but I'm going to put one of them out there. Somebody says, trust no one. Trusting no one is that's a good starting point, right? Trust no one is a good starting point. I agree with that. But there are some situations that stand out more than others, all right? You're going to end up probably not trusting, but let's say siding with a side. You're probably going to do that. So you'd like as much knowledge as you could about who's more credible. Here's a little tip. Don't trust anybody who has a brand consistency problem. Here's what I mean by that. A brand consistency problem is you've built yourself into a kind of voice. You always have a kind of slant on things. You're the person who's known for saying whatever. As soon as you're the person who's known for saying whatever, and you start monetizing that, your credibility goes right out the door. Because you sort of need to stay that person to be the brand that people are coming to. And now what do you do? Because you need to be that person, all right? And I'm going to mention a specific person, but I want to generalize the point, all right? So it's not about a specific person. So you've been watching Alex Berenson, who's probably maybe the most notable or famous, I would say skeptic would be the right word. So when you see him appearing or writing, and he's all over the place with the coronavirus story, I believe he worked at the New York Times, so he's a credible kind of person with a credible resume. And he's been skeptical of a lot of the data science that's coming out of the coronavirus stuff. Now, in the beginning of the pandemic, is it useful to have a skeptic? Yeah, it's really useful. You really do want some strong voices to say, you say that makes sense scientifically, but where's your data? And then you show the data, and then you still want somebody to say, yeah, but I don't think that data says what you think it's going to say. So a skeptic with credentials, at least journalistic credentials like Alex Berenson, very, very valuable. You want as many of those as you can get. Smart people, right? You don't want dumb skeptics. You want a smart, legitimately professional person who's an actual skeptic. So from that point of view, he's a national treasure, right? I always appreciate skeptics. They're national treasures, especially if they go against the grain and it's going to cost them something professionally. And it probably did. He probably took a hit professionally. But I think he was starting out doubting, and maybe still does, I don't know his exact position on masks and social distancing and lockdowns. Now, is it reasonable to be a skeptic on masks, social distancing, and lockdowns? Yeah, it's reasonable. Completely reasonable. Is it right? I don't know. Right? I don't know. Because we don't have data we can trust, which would be the point of a skeptic, right? The whole point of a skeptic is, hey, this data you're selling us, it's not reliable. So when you see somebody like Berenson say your data is not reliable on masks, social distancing, whatever else, I feel like he's in pretty solid ground most of the time. I think that most of the time that data is not reliable. meaning it's not really nailed down that these facts are telling you what you think they're telling you. But as time goes by, those things which you should be properly skeptical about, you get a little more clarity over time. I believe that the consensus of science, and even maybe skeptics, is that masks surely must make some difference. So, not so much protecting you from virus, but from the ones that you might be giving off. But now we have vaccinations. Would you take the same level of skepticism for masks and lockdowns and stuff and take that to vaccinations? You should, because skepticism everywhere is always a valuable asset, right? Even if it's wrong, you want that point and counterpoint. You always want that. So Alex Berenson was tweeting, I think yesterday, that Israel has not yet shown any effect from their vaccinations, and that they seem to be the most complete in getting people vaccinated over 65 at least. And I saw that and I thought, I don't know, is this where you want to put the skepticism? I would have waited a little bit, but almost 5 minutes after he tweeted that Israel's not showing any difference, Joel Pollack and other people who were also following it said, no, actually the data is really clear. Here's the graph. 3 weeks after the vaccination started, you see the hospitalizations, not every other measure, but just hospitalizations just plummeted. So, who's right? Is Alex Berenson's chart and data that didn't seem to show anything obvious happening there, is that right? Or are the other people who said, no, here's the current information on hospitalizations, and they're actual stories based on news reports, are they right? I don't know. The problem is, just because you see a data in a news story, it doesn't mean it's right anymore. It used to make me think it was probably right, but not anymore. You can't really trust anything anymore. But if I had to bet, I would bet they're working, and I would bet that the graphs showing lower hospitalizations, I would bet that's accurate. I would bet that things are going the right direction. So, to my first question, who should you trust? Alex Berenson has the problem, which is not necessarily his fault, right? This is not a criticism. But once you become the skeptic guy, it's hard to get out of that, right? Once you're the skeptic guy, that's why you get asked to be on the show. It's why a publisher will publish your book. And it would be easy to overdo the skepticism, all right? So, bringing you back to the specific personality, is Alex Berenson a credible person? Yes. Yes, he's a very credible person. But if you take the most credible person in the world and put them in a situation where they've got a brand compatibility issue, that credibility, you have to mentally adjust it, right? So that would be one tip for knowing who to trust. It doesn't matter how credible or smart or well-informed the person is, if they have a brand issue. And that's what you want to look for. Now, am I suggesting that Alex Berenson would intentionally say something that was wrong for his brand? No. No, I have no reason to believe he would do anything intentionally. I'm just saying that you should not make any assumptions about people's internal thoughts, and if they have a brand issue, factor that in. I think people don't understand how communication works, which is interesting for someone who's a professional writer, that he doesn't understand how communication works. Let me explain to you how communication works. It's a very basic concept, and apparently some people don't get this. It goes like this. You have to assume what a speaker is thinking in order to understand what they're saying. So you have to consider the source. So if your best friend mocks you, you say, it's my best friend. In my best friend's mind, they're not being mean to me, they're just having fun. So who says it and what they're thinking completely determines how you accept it, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say I said to you, hey, I'd like to invite you over to my house for dinner. How would you interpret that? If somebody said, I'd like you to come over for dinner tonight, what would be the logical assumption about what the person who said that was thinking? You'd probably say to yourself, well, I think that what they're thinking is that they would like to entertain, and they will make a meal, and they will serve that meal, and I will sit at the table with them, and we will eat that meal. But that's not said, right? That's all just assumed. In your head, you're filling in all the blanks. Stop getting ahead of me in the comments, you damn smart people. My clever point was just coming up, and you beat me to it in the comments. Would you ever assume that if they said, I'd like you to come over for dinner, that their real intention was to eat you, and that they are cannibals? And if not, why not? Why would you not make the assumption that they're cannibals? Because the words fit both meanings, right? How do you not assume they're cannibals? What evidence do you have that they're not cannibals? And the answer is, because nobody does that. Nobody. Nobody invites you to their house to eat you. Now, I'm not saying it's never been done. Jeffrey Dahmer, got close to that. I don't think he used those words. But you have to make an assumption that the person speaking is not an absolute crazy, insane monster, unless, obviously, they are. So, when Aaron Rupar when I was questioning him and saying there's nothing about drinking bleach in President Trump's statements when that event happened, he points me to the place where he says he sees it. And I think, how can you see the thing that isn't there? And so I read the words, and he says, Rupar says, quote, in a tweet back to me, he was clearly talking about household cleaning products when he refers to disinfectant. Now, if you read the words exactly the way Aaron Rupar did, could you interpret it to mean household cleaning products? And the answer is yes. Yes, you could. You could interpret the exact words, and specifically the word disinfectant. You could interpret that to mean bleach, right? But should you? Is it completely reasonable to think that the President of the United States, someone who had been, handling the office fine, seems to operate in public, went to college, is an actual operating adult in the real world, is it reasonable to think that he was suggesting putting household disinfectants directly into your body? In what world do you make that assumption that the word disinfectant, especially when it's in the context of talking about light, is light, disinfectant, light as a disinfectant, light as a disinfectant, disinfectant? What logical reason would you pick that word disinfectant, which is used, a light is a disinfectant? Why would you just pick a word out of a sentence and say, all those other times before it and after it, he was talking about light, because he used the words specifically. But this one time right in the middle, when he used the word disinfectant, that was the time he meant, let's put some bleach into your body. That's what Aaron Rupar assumed the president was thinking. He made the assumption that the President of the United States quite literally would stand in public and suggest ingesting bleach. Why would anybody be that dumb? And I'm not talking about Trump. How could you be so dumb that you think that the president would say that's even possible? If you were making a list of all the things that could have happened, would that even be on the list? Because it's just like somebody inviting you over for dinner. You don't assume they mean cannibalism. Ever. Ever. It's never the right assumption. But a lot of people did, just like Aaron Rupar did. He's not alone, right? There are tens of millions of people made that same assumption. Why? Because the fake news had drawn such a caricature of Trump that that seemed possible. In other words, the fake news was so thoroughly convincing that if President Trump had invited Aaron Rupar over for dinner, Aaron Rupar could reasonably assume it was meant to eat him, because that's how bad Trump is. That's the world we live in. That somebody would assume that that was even something that the president would say out of his mouth, and that it's even possible that that could have happened. You got to assume that wasn't possible if you're going to understand how language works, right? Language doesn't work if you make the dumbest assumption about what the person is thinking. It never works. Nothing would make sense if you made the dumbest assumption about what somebody's thinking. So let me do that with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, his highest priority is getting rid of racial inequality. Therefore, he wants to kill all the white people. Why would I assume that? Wouldn't that be stupid? Does anybody think that Joe Biden wants to kill all white people? Well, it's right there in what he said. He wants racial equality. How else are you going to get it? Boom, boom, boom. Logical. So watching Democrats not know, especially a professional writer. I mean, Aaron Rupar is a professional writer at a pretty big publication, Vox. He knows how language works. He knows how talking works. He knows how communication works. He's literally a high-end professional. And even he thought that Trump maybe suggested drinking bleach. That's how bad the fake news is. I mean, that's bad. That's as bad as you can get. All right. Anything else we need to cover? I don't think so. Somebody says it's intentional, but you can't rule that out. But honestly, I don't get that vibe. If because we had some back and forth, and he did not defend himself like somebody who knew he was wrong. He defended himself exactly like somebody who thought he was right. Now, I can't read his mind, so if you're going to say to yourself, but you don't know, he might have been, acting, yeah, I guess that's possible. I'm just giving you my best judgment, is that it looked genuine.